One of my patrons sent me this video, Do the Opposite of What the Media Says, by Brett Cooper. Can I just say Brett for a girl's name? That's pretty cool. Anyway, Brett's video is a response to this Vox article, You're Probably Eating Way Too Much Protein. I guess I should mention Brett works for the Daily Wire. So yeah, she's clearly conservative, which made me a little bit nervous before watching this, since conservatives seem to get pretty upset when anyone mentions eating less protein, eating less meat. But look, some Democrats are easily triggered by certain things too. Just because Brett works for the Daily Wire doesn't mean she thinks red meat is essential, or that she blames everything on Bill Gates.
Bill Gates, Bill Gates, Bill Gates. Are you bought and paid for by Bill Gates?
Or maybe it does.
Americans are obsessed with protein. They eat about 2 times as much of it as the federal government advises. Oh no. And 60% of US adults are trying to get even more of it in their diets. Oh no, Americans are trying to be healthier in the midst of an obesity crisis.
I call this turf and turf.
She thinks Americans eating more meat than they already do is good for them and will help them lose weight. Even our own government, despite the massive amount of lobbying from the animal agriculture industry, thinks we should probably eat less meat.
My favorite comment was, "You guys are a bunch of soy boys."
Yeah, well, I'm a soy bitch. Level up. Seriously though, are we still doing soy boys?
Literally, because they don't eat meat, apparently. They are literally just sitting around writing these articles eating tofu.
This is why liberals say conservatives can't do comedy.
As the federal government advises, the obesity epidemic should render anyone a laughingstock who believes anything the government says about food. Obviously, because how has that worked out for us? How has following their health guidelines worked out for anyone?
Since when have Americans followed government dietary guidelines? Look at fiber, for instance. The USDA recommends 28 grams per day. Americans average only 15. We also eat way more sugar than what's recommended, a lot of oil, not nearly enough fruits and vegetables, and way too many calories. More on that in a minute.
I remember when the federal government told us to eat 7 servings of bread a day. Oh yes, exactly. In order to keep your heart healthy. Heart healthy fiber.
I know I don't really need to say this, but the government doesn't recommend 7 servings of bread. They recommend around 7 servings of grains, at least half of which should be whole grains. And yeah, Americans are definitely not doing this. Again, they are not following government guidelines. What is she talking about? And all this information I just shared is free and easily accessible. All you have to do is Google fiber intake in America and USDA fiber recommendation. And there you go. You have the information I just shared with you. It's a lot easier just to blame the government, I guess.
Back to the article. Their argument against meat is twofold. Number one, Americans are eating too much protein and protein is killing us. They say that Americans should be eating around 0.36 grams of protein per pound of weight, and they cite the National Academies of Science for this. But here's the kicker. According to the National Academies and the Institute of Medicine, this guideline is for the minimum amount of protein you should be eating in order to not fall into a deficit.
The RDA isn't actually a minimum. That's how most people use it. That's how I usually use it. But it's actually just a guideline, a safe and adequate level that ensures the vast majority of people will get enough if they follow the RDA. For instance, the RDA for vitamin C, it's 75 milligrams. This is to ensure, again, that the vast majority of Americans are covered. Some, maybe a lot of us, don't actually need that much. But setting the RDA higher, having this generous margin of safety, ensures that basically everyone will get enough if they're getting 75 milligrams per day. So if we look at protein, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight means the vast majority of people are getting enough protein, getting this amount. Some of us might actually require less. Again, RDA is not a minimum. That said, many experts without ties to animal agriculture have argued for years that the RDA for protein should be higher. One of my favorite sources for nutrition science, examine.com, argues that it should be higher for everyone, including for sedentary people. It should be 1.2 grams instead of 0.8 grams. The reason they argue is because, number one, studies using a superior method of determining protein requirements have come to that conclusion, this 1.2 figure. And number two, higher protein intake may increase muscle mass without exercise. That's pretty amazing. And it's particularly important as we age, since we all start losing some amount of muscle around age 40. So the example Vox gives, the 171-pound woman needing 61.5 grams, if we use 1.2, that bumps it up to 93 grams of protein per day. While the 171-pound woman eating 62 grams certainly wouldn't be deficient in protein, she wouldn't show any clinical signs if she went to a doctor, there would likely be benefits for her if she increased her protein intake. So you're probably eating way too much protein is a bad take. Now, if they said you're probably eating way too much animal protein, then we'd be on the same team. To be fair, Fox has updated a lot of things and added a lot of nuance to particularly the part about protein and RDA. However, they haven't changed really the worst sentence in the whole thing to me. Excessive protein consumption, especially from cholesterol-rich animal-based foods, is correlated with increased risk of cancer and heart disease. Not especially, but only. There's no correlation with plant-based protein and an increased risk of disease. It's just a really confusing article because they talk as if more protein in general is bad, but then most of the stuff in the article is really focused on meat and eating more plant-based foods and getting more fiber. This chart is actually a perfect example of that. Many people are eating a lot more protein than they need, but when you look at it, here's the United States and Canada, the green is plant-based and the pink is animal-based. The vast majority of our protein is being met by animal foods. The story should not be reduce the amount of protein you're eating, but reduce the amount of animal products you're eating, and then increase the amount of protein from plant-based foods. Telling people to eat less protein is not evidence-based.
Also, women specifically, you probably should be eating a lot more protein than you are right now. Like, I did not realize how little protein I was eating every day until I started actually tracking it, and it is key for us if we want to regulate our hormones and lose weight, gain muscle, etc. Like, women do not eat enough protein.
Really? Let's go through the numbers. The mean protein intake for American women is 15.7% of total calories. If we assume a 2,000 calorie diet, that would be 314 calories. Divide 314 by 4, which is the number of calories in 1 gram of protein, and we get 78.5 grams of protein. Again, the RDA for the average American woman is 62 grams. So American women are already getting more protein than the RDA. And this assumes a 2,000 calorie diet. American women are not eating 2,000 calories. The average caloric intake for men and women combined is 3,500 calories per day, which isn't surprising because, again, the average American woman weighs 171 pounds at 5'10", right? No, at just under 5'4". That's a BMI of 29.8, just under the obese cutoff. The average American woman is obese. And just for reference, I am the average American woman in terms of height. I am just under 5'4". I eat around 2,000 calories a day. I'm not exercising right now. I haven't been for weeks. And yet I weigh 134 pounds. Point is, clearly the average American woman is eating a lot more than 2,000 calories per day, which means the average American woman is getting way more than 78.5 grams of protein per day. Singling out protein as the reason why American women are overweight, it's just weird.
Community Notes almost immediately jumped in with this banger, and they said, the tweet is written to imply that one can have too much protein. Current research does not support this assertion, and the tweet greatly oversimplifies protein consumption research. Instead, research points towards eating protein sources that have a package of benefits, almost like whole foods, almost like animal byproducts. Crazy!
Pretty funny considering the link in this tweet, the source material, is this Health Harvard article where they specifically say protein does not mean meat. Beef, poultry, and pork can certainly provide high-quality protein, but so can many plant foods, including whole grains, beans, and other legumes, nuts, and vegetables. She shares this tweet, which she thinks is just incredible. Again, RDA is not a minimum, but it gets worse.
For example, the federal RDA of vitamin C is the absolute minimum you need to eat to avoid getting scurvy.
So if I get 74 milligrams of vitamin C a day, I'll get scurvy? No! Overt deficiency symptoms occur only if vitamin C intake falls below approximately 10 milligrams per day for many weeks. Which makes sense. Why would guidelines be set right at or right above the point of disease? That is so dangerous. You want a buffer to account for individual differences. There might be people who get scurvy at 15 milligrams. Plus, vitamin C intake is not just about preventing scurvy. You can say this about any nutrient, like protein, right? It's not just about avoiding protein deficiency. Someone could be getting 30 milligrams of vitamin C per day and no, they don't have scurvy, but they could benefit from slightly more. Going to a doctor wouldn't tell you that because any problems probably would be subclinical. They wouldn't be detectable by a blood test or whatever. It makes so much more sense to set recommendations quite a bit higher than the point of disease, particularly for something like vitamin C that is safe at way higher doses than the RDA.
Same for vitamin D and rickets.
Babies are not going to get rickets because they're getting 390 international units instead of 400. There's a large safety margin. To have this level of confidence and yet be so wrong, it's kind of impressive.
Posting this and allowing an aging population and an obese population to think that they don't need protein when it in fact is the #1 way to avoid bone density loss is not only irresponsible journalism, it is harmful.
Really? Because a recent review of 11 systematic reviews concluded it remains unclear whether a dose above the current recommendation or type of protein intake, animal or plant protein, affects bone health overall. Now, it makes sense that protein would be beneficial, and that is one of the reasons I like to eat more protein, is that it may be beneficial for bone health. But to have, again, this level of confidence, like resistance training, we know resistance training and other forms of exercise as well helps with bone mineral density. So I would say that's the #1 way.
Rethink this. Absolute mic drop.
I mean, they did manage 4 factually inaccurate statements in a single tweet. Again, pretty impressive.
Why, according to Vox, are people getting so sick and having heart and cholesterol issues that they suddenly link to protein and meat? Could it have to do with the fact that our federal government, the government that they are so proudly citing, has been telling us that fiber is king and processed foods are better for us than animal products like eggs and butter and meat for over 50 years?
The government promotes animal products like a lot. They promote eggs and various meats for protein. They continue to promote dairy as its own special section, thanks in large part to, again, a lot of lobbying by the animal agriculture industry. So again, what is she talking about? It's a simple Google search. Just Google USDA MyPlate. You can see the recommendations right there. It's actually a pretty decent website. It's pretty user-friendly. It's easy to peruse. There is no excuse for this misinformation. And what ultra-processed foods are they recommending? Whole grain bread? By the NOVA classification, to be fair, it is considered ultra-processed if you buy like the pre-sliced in the bag, the Sara Lee or whatever. But as many have argued, that doesn't mean it's unhealthy. Yes, ultra-processed foods are devoid of nutrition 99% of the time, but there's always the exception to the rule. Whole grain, pre-sliced, packaged bread is that exception. She keeps talking about processed foods, which is just so weird. What does this have to do with the Vox article? Nowhere in the article do they recommend replacing protein with potato chips. And funnily enough, this study she shares in the video found that breads, processed breads, and cereals actually reduced the incidence of cancers, etc. Can you guess which group increased it? Yeah.
It's the medical industrial complex that has been telling us not to cut carbs and not to focus on natural whole foods, and that actually Cheerios are great for heart health.
They're not bad, actually. They contain very little sugar and have soluble fiber, which can lower cholesterol. Can help lower cholesterol as part of a heart-healthy diet is evidence-based. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the rest of Brett's video, or really any of the video.
With meat and dairy production accounting for upwards of 1/5 of greenhouse gas emissions. Are you bought and paid for by Bill Gates? Because it sure sounds like it.
I guess I'm naive because I kind of thought the conservative obsession with Bill Gates was kind of tongue-in-cheek. She makes me think, no, whether Vox is shilling for Bill Gates or not, the numbers are the numbers. The estimate for emissions from animal agriculture is 10 to 20% of total emissions. 20% is 1/5. Vox is right.
They do have an entire series called Meatless, where they cover all of this in a 5-day e-course that you can buy. Again, how much did Bill Gates pay you to push this?
It's like a little kid. They don't really understand nuance and complexity, and they want every issue to have a simple answer. Americans are overweight. Protein. Americans are unhealthy. Bill Gates.
What about the fact that the energy it takes to create all of this processed crap food and the synthetic, plant-based fake meat is worse for the environment than raising cattle?
I love how she says things with no sources whatsoever, probably because there aren't any. The evidence we have on plant and animal emissions in general makes it crystal clear that a plant-based diet is way more environmentally friendly. So we would expect vegan meats made from plants to be more environmentally friendly as well. And they are way friendlier than beef.
In fact, grass-fed cattle actually helps reduce carbon emissions, but nobody really wants to talk about that. All the environmentalists, they don't want to say that because they've been promoting being a vegan for so long, so if they actually said grass-fed cattle is good for you, they'd have to roll back every other ethical standard that they have adopted. Wouldn't work out for them.
She's so conspiratorially minded. Is that a word? Someone says something she doesn't agree with. Bill Gates. Someone promotes vegan meat. Bill Gates. The environmentalists know that grass-fed cattle is better for the environment. They just won't admit it. Or maybe, just maybe, the environmentalists don't know that. They don't believe that because it's not true.
In fact, grass-fed cattle actually helps reduce carbon emissions.
Compared to what? Grass-fed beef compared to grain-fed beef? Highly unlikely, considering grass-fed require much more land and produce much more methane. This person is pro-grass-fed beef and regenerative agriculture, and even she admits any reduction in emissions is small. You know what definitely reduces carbon emissions when compared to beef, and by a shit ton? Like every single plant food. So maybe there's a really good reason environmentalists don't talk about grass-fed beef and carbon emissions. Maybe we prefer to focus on foods that actually make a meaningful impact. But let's pretend grass-fed beef is actually better for the environment. So what? Because of the increased land requirement, it cannot replace grain-fed beef. There's a reason factory farming exists, and it's not to be cruel to cows, even though it is. It's to feed as many people as possible, as quickly and as cheaply as possible. You cannot meet the current demand for beef with grass-fed cows. So even if grass-fed were significantly better than grain-fed, we would still have to significantly curtail consumption of beef. Here's a farmer who actually believes in regenerative agriculture, actually practices it himself, admitting exactly this.
Why is the mainstream media and people like Bill Gates so hell-bent on demonizing this practice and this source of food? Is it because it makes them money and keeps us sick and keeps us reliant upon their medicine and technology? I wouldn't be surprised.
Like, it's funny, but it's not. I feel bad for her. I wholeheartedly believe that this type of thinking, this paranoid way of thinking, is not good for her mental health. Seeing boogeymen everywhere instead of the obvious. We just don't agree with you. Vox doesn't agree with you. Bill Gates doesn't agree with you. We've looked at the data and come to the obvious conclusion that a plant-based diet significantly reduces our carbon footprint. There's no conspiracy, Brett. You're just wrong. Thank you for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, I still have my merch sale going on right now for the rest of February, Feb 10 for 10% off. Thank you so much to my members here on YouTube and my patrons at patreon.com/unnaturalvegan. I post 2 exclusive videos a month for tier 2 patrons and members. There's a vlog just talking about mostly kids, baby stuff. And then the other one is a controversial topic, and it could be really about anything. The last video was about Blippi. So yeah, there you go. Anyway, thanks again, guys. New video soon.
Rough Greens knows that dog food is dead food.
What the fuck? What does that mean? Dog food is dead food? Oh, that's actually the company's tagline. Uh-oh, 100% vegan. Nobody tell Brett the company she shills for is woke. Probably owned by Bill Gates, too.